Welcome back to Birth the Middle Way. My name is Emma Cardinal. I'm here with Sammy Love, as well as my dear friend of 5 years, I guess we just figured out, Alessandra, who is here to share a little bit about her birth story, as well as her experience of having an undisturbed physiological birth in a hospital setting, which based on the current free birthing, undisturbed birthing narrative feels almost impossible. And yet you found a hospital where they actually promote this. So if you wanted to just share a little bit about who you are, why you are, who you be, what you do. And yeah, I'd love to hear about your story.
I'm currently in a bit of an in-between phase, where I recently let go of my job. I was let go, and am full-time mama to Maya at the moment, and just exploring, just letting things come, and also diving into different creative outlets that I'd never thought I would be going into. So we'll talk about that maybe towards the end, but yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Amazing. And so before we hopped on the call, you also said that it was Maya's birthday a couple days ago. So happy birthday, Maya. She just turned 2.
Yes.
Yes, amazing. Amazing. So what hospital did you birth at? Because this is what really that's a piece that really stands out for me is that you birthed in a hospital that is encouraging physiological birth. And based on the statistics of cesarean rates rising all over the country, all over North America and other parts of the world, that to me feels like an anomaly. And I'm really curious to know more about.
Yeah, it's called Misqua Perkins Hospital. It's in Cowansville, and it's just really wild how I found this hospital because I actually was not considering a hospital at the very beginning. The With my first pregnancy, I was actually planning to go with midwives, and sadly, like I had a miscarriage, and a very traumatic one in the sense that it would let me in the emergency of this hospital, which is actually how I found it because it was literally it's 5 minutes away from where I was living, but the care that I had was amazing. It was small, so I wasn't. It's not like being in the city where I don't know, you're just another person, or um I was treated right away. Anyways, so I just had such I felt really supported. Even the doctor who delivered the news when I was like in shock, like I kind of didn't know what was going on, um, was really kind, and it just led me to like inquire a little bit more about this hospital. So uh, I later found out that they have a birthing center, and in this birthing center, they promote physiological births. And the second time I got pregnant, I was leaning more towards a hospital just because I was afraid of having, I guess, a similar experience, or I was just a little bit fearful of what the like that if anything could happen, I guess. So yeah, so I started going down that route and learning more about the hospital and navigating the system because of course going through there it's like you have a doctor, a traditional doctor that follows you throughout your pregnancy, um and then anyways, we'll kind of go more into that, but so that's how I found this hospital, and it's actually the best hospital in Canada for birthing. And I this is the reason why I wanted to talk to you about this, is because it's like, how can we have the conversation with, I don't know, our government, or like, how can we bring awareness to having hospitals that support women, like if they choose to have an unmedicated birth and not have, you know, uh, I forget these like contraptions, right? They have the forceps, or like all these things where that disturb the birthing process, um, which were none of those things were like requested of me. Like they were none of those things were pushed on me at all through the entire pregnancy. Even so, here I'll start from the beginning because
Can
I
I ask a
feel
question quick before you get into the
yeah.
story? When you say that it's the best hospital in Canada, are you referring to their statistics around birth? They have the lowest levels of C-section and intervention rates, or what is classifying it as the best hospital in Canada?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would have to come back to you on that.
Okay, okay. Yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah,
cool. So maybe we can share that in
in the
below the
notes.
yeah, in the notes below the episode,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And so is that something you'd heard then that you're speaking that okay, yeah,
yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so dive
Uh,
into your story. Just want to sidebar there.
um, so I had a doula who was actually as well. That was part of the process when I was going in with the when I was setting up with like the midwives at the beginning. And I immediately called her to be my doula for this experience too, for this pregnancy. And she was actually a little bit she did it because it was me, but she said she wouldn't do another hospital birth again. Um,
Did she say why?
yeah, I think it's among the same reasons as like being, like there's only so much, you know, what she explained to me was she she has many she's been to attends many births and sometimes attends the same hospital or attends the same facility over, and so she also needs to like she's building a relationship with you, but she's also building a relationship with the hospital. And so if she's there like saying like no, 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 like pushing against the hospital, it's like that relationship kind of gets sour and also brings that into the birthing experience. So I like she did prep us a lot and she was there for support if anything were to like that was against what we had talked about, like what my wishes were. But she really like gave us the tools. She empowered us to really like be um aware of
Self-advocates,
what
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
And
educating towards self-advocacy because it's extremely, I can speak into that slightly. It's extremely hard to be a doula, honestly, in the hospital setting because I mean, there's such a vast spectrum of education, right? There's like a weekend course, and maybe somebody has literally spent, like a week studying birth and is going in with all of these ideas. And then there's people that are self-educating that know a lot, and so that spectrum. But doctors, it's viewed as like an insuperiority thing. There's such a hierarchy, there's such a
Mhm,
rank happening in
mhm,
in the hospital system, and doulas are at the bottom of that rank, and so they are seen as, uneducated, in the way, annoying, just kind of a nuisance to the doctors, and they're treated that way.
mhm,
And even just seeing my cousin over the like who's a labor and delivery nurse, like her statement to me was there's some really bad doulas in Saskatoon. And I'm like, probably there is, there's good and bad along the spectrum of everything in the realm of care. And like likely her orientation is towards seeing them as a nuisance in the space, right? And
mhm,
even that advocacy is just like annoying. Like, how dare you
mhm,
test our authority or challenge what we're telling everybody in this space is the right thing to do? How dare you? Kind of is the vibe.
mhm. I
So,
could see that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's unfortunate. But yeah, she really like recommended books. So one of the books that I read that you probably all know is the Ina May,
The
I
spiritual
forget it's
midwifery. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so there I read many different birth stories and also listening to other people's birth stories. And I really like prepared myself like almost like a year, those in those 9 months or even a little bit more than a year of like, okay, what is this going to kind of like look like? But then also being open to anything because really anything can happen. I mean, it's like as much as I wanted a home like as natural as possible, like a physiological birth. I mean, it's like if there's any complication, I'd have to be open to a C-section. It's not it's just also being open-minded to the whole spectrum of what could happen. Um, but yeah, so she agreed and we that's what we did that. And so so I had I guess I'm just trying to think like the doctor visits were super simple. They're like, I go in 10 minutes, like, oh, okay, see you, bye. Like, oh, there's really not much to talk about. I actually preferred that because I really didn't want them kind of like pushing anything on me. Like, There is like closer to the end because I did go to 41 weeks. So closer to the end, they start asking like, okay, do you want a cervical sweep or and you have the right to say no. You don't have to. So I said no. Then you have, I think it's like end of 40 weeks. I had another appointment at the hospital. And that's again, they asked me, like they're starting to set up a date for what is it?
Induction.
Induction. And I said, but you can say I asked them, can we wait? And for a second appointment, like let's push it as far as we can, and then I'll come in for the second appointment, and then we'll decide then, and so luckily she came before that second appointment.
Yeah.
Can we just pause for a quick
Unfortunate.
Can we just pause for a
Yeah.
quick moment? Because I want to share an observation as I'm listening, because we, at the very beginning of the short 11 minutes that we've been talking, you were saying that this hospital is one of the best in Canada, or the
Mm,
best in Canada, for non or low intervention births and undisturbed births. And just now you also shared that they were still talking about this due date thing and induction. And that to me feels contradictory. And I just wanted to
mm,
name that because I mean, and I wasn't there in those meetings or in those appointments, but
mm-hmm,
that to me feels contradictory in a hospital. And because
mm-hmm,
that is a common thing in hospitals, right? It's a common thing
mm-hmm,
in birth, this idea that, oh, you're reaching a certain time, we need to then intervene at this point because
mm-hmm.
at 40 weeks, all of a sudden, something can go really wrong. And in previous episodes, I think we actually talked about the statistics um, of stillbirth and all of these things that can occur later on and within these time frames. Is that we did that, right, Sam?
Yeah.
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 And so I just wanted to name that as well because, yeah, that's just something that really stood out. And I wanted to make sure that we didn't pass.
Right,
Yeah.
because induction in and of itself, I just want to add to that, like the orientation towards induction in and of itself is saying that at some point, there comes a point where we can no longer trust the physiological onset,
Right.
the physiological process.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I do want to add that so during the orientation, like the orientation of the hospital of the birthing center, this was prior to those. It seemed to me that well, actually, not seemed. It was that the nurses were more on board with the physiological birth rather than the doctors. I think the doctors there are take shifts. So, like for example, my doctor that's at a little clinic or like a clinic in town or whatever, she does like two shifts at that hospital, at that big hospital. So I feel like this rotation, it's kind of like
Complicates
I
things.
feel I think so. I feel like if they were maybe there probably are doctors. I didn't have that doctor that was, but I think there are probably doctors that are stationed there, and that's like their unit, and they are probably more for like that experience. But I think that sometimes with the like I said, like with the rotation of other doctors that are coming in from like different areas, they're more by the book. I'm gonna call it like that. I don't know. Well, maybe that's
Also,
not the
like
right
I
term.
think even just like the shift changes and these things that are, they're really challenging obstacles to even consider, from this perspective of like,
Hmm.
okay, well, how do we work with the system and how do we make it better? Like the fact that there is shifts
Hmm.
and there kind of has to be, and even in midwifery collectives that exists, but
Hmm.
even just that shift change in and of itself can bring in an energetic of like rushing, right? Because if you feel like you're on the apex of that birth happening, but your shift is about to change, it's like
Hmm.
you want to be there to see it through, right? It's like that, just like that human desire. And so does the birthing mother, really. Like the birthing mother who's received a certain support,
Hmm.
throughout the laboring process, she does not want that care provider to leave her in that, like at that juncture of being so close to emergence, right? Like ideally, most of the time she would prefer I've heard it like I've heard that the opposite of that in certain birthing mothers where they've worked with midwife teams and then that shift change was going to bring in the midwife that they had most desired to birth with. And that's where I've heard mothers speak into like, no, I was like kind of holding out for that shift change. But just to like even
Mm,
just, like name that like the fact that a shift change exists, period, can bring different energetics, in either direction to the birth space.
Yeah, I really like that point. Like, I didn't think about that.
Right.
Hmm.
Right.
yeah.
Beautiful.
Keep
So yeah,
going.
continue.
We just keep interjecting.
All good, all good. Yeah, so I managed to say, well, not managed, but I said no to all those those interventions. But of course, like, yeah, I'm not sure. I think my doula said like, oh, just don't go to the last appointment. Like if it doesn't like happen or whatever. Anyways, to each their own. But yeah, and so then the contractions happened and I birthed. So I did most of the process at home and with my doula. And funny enough, my best friend was actually practicing to be a doula too. So I asked her to be like an assistant to my doula, and so it was really special. Like, um, so at the first part was with just me and my partner, and then maybe around 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. or something, my friend came, and then the doula came, and then we continued um, the birthing process at home until my doula started seeing that I was transitioning again, and so that was the moment where she's like, okay, now we have to start, getting ready to go to the hospital. And the whole time, like my husband had put on the Bluetooth speaker this like like Peruvian flute, like the native flute, and it was just on loop. And I'm Peruvian, so it was for me. It was like not only
Oh,
yeah, so that just kept
cool.
me also like in the zone. Like it was just you're in the space and you don't want to break out of it, right? That's the whole thing. Like the whole journey also into the hospital is like what you mentioned earlier is like how do you just stay in that zone? And so um that was like one of the things was that even in the car like birthing in the car and we are playing it on the speaker and then um as soon as we get to the hospital my doula puts like a blanket on me, so this is to avoid the fluorescent lights. um I don't care if I look like a weirdo. It's literally like coming in with a giant blanket on. And then they checked me in, and then like my husband went and checked me in, and then led us to the room. And um, in this section, they have a big tub. They have like the birth like I don't know. It's almost like they have like for the to hang the rope, and then it's also like a seat for your partner to like hold you. There's like different tools that they have. So yeah, I booked all of them. I reserved all of them, like the ones that were available. So I continued birthing in the tub. There was this big tub. And this is where I want to talk about the nurses because this is the part where I felt like was really undisturbed in a sense. Actually, I forgot to mention as soon as you get checked into the hospital, they have to unfortunately like they have to check your dilation, like how. So that part, it's like that's in a sense an intervention, like that can break you out of the I
The
guess of the
process,
zone because
right?
yeah, the process because they take your blood, I think they do your blood work and they check how far along you are. I was 8 centimeters at that time, so um, but I was okay. Like that was fine. I kept like I was still in the zone, and so then I went into continued the process in the tub. And the nurse that took care of us was like an angel, I swear. Like she was humming to me, like wow, it was really beautiful. She was like, um, and she didn't ask me to move. Like she didn't ask me to move into a position so that she can like check the heartbeat. She literally like, I'm in the tub and I'm like in a position. She would go and like maneuver. Not once did she ever ask me to move. Like, She would just come in very gently, like in a very soft voice, like, okay, I'm gonna check, the heartbeat. Okay, I'll be back. I'm gonna come back in whatever. And um,
I had just asked, so you said that the cervical, like it was mandatory. Like, did you ask to not have it?
so I know that I think that they have to check you. I think that they do. I didn't ask
So
not
that is
to.
semantic in and of itself is like deeply triggering for me, like
Hmm.
because to say I have to check you, like it is a woman's body. There is
Hmm.
never a time, in my opinion, where it should even be relatively legal or normalized for any
Hmm.
human being to tell a woman, I have to touch your vulva.
So
Hmm.
I, yeah, I actually had a different experience because I had the doctors ask me, we want to do a cervical check because we want to see this. We want to just like have more of an idea. And I said no. And they said, okay. And then they proceeded to like, then I said like, why? Like, you need to give me more information about like what information is this going to give you if you look
Hmm.
inside of my vagina? Like, what is that actually going to tell you? And
Touch inside.
yeah, touch inside. And like, I don't remember what they said. I was in a state,
Right, of course.
but I remember eventually consenting to it. But so for me, I
Hmm.
actually had a different experience where it wasn't described as mandatory. It was described as it's going to give them more information so they can support me with a clearer picture
Hmm.
of what's happening.
Right. And the beautiful thing that I just want to acknowledge is that's a different, like the response to that is different for each woman. And so that might not have felt like
Hmm.
a disturbance for you. But if
Hmm.
we are currently painting the picture of this is the best hospital in Canada, I feel like that's an
Hmm.
important thing to know. If cervical
Hmm.
checks are mandatory and a woman does not have the sovereignty to refuse them, that alone would, lead me to say it's not the best hospital anywhere. That like that's a
Yeah,
big thing for me.
that's a good question. I think like at the time I think like they asked me that they were gonna do one, like they were gonna give me a cervical check, and I said yes, but it's because I knew I knew it was so that they can see how far along I am, but I don't think I questioned, oh, can I say no?
Right.
Actually,
Right.
that was one thing I didn't ask like myself. Oh, like can I say no to this? And I didn't quite like I just went along with it.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that's a
Right.
um. And
Which I want
so.
to just highlight that again. Sorry for interrupting you again, but like what you said there is really beautiful and profound, right? Like I didn't even question. And so then my curiosity in the wake of that is like, okay, how normalized is the collective birth narrative of this is what birth is? This is what happens. Your water breaks on your kitchen floor. Everybody freaks out. Let's run to, the way it's painted in the movies and cervical checks and figuring out how, there's always that checking and then, oh, she's 4 centimeters. Oh, she's this, and it's just so normalized as the way birth happens. And so that leads me to really feel curious around how many women are even questioning, do I have a choice? Do I have options here? What can I say no to? What can I, like, what is my role? What is my authority? And so it really just, in the wake of that, it's like, okay, how many women aren't even orienting towards, can I question? Can I say no? Because they've had this story of what birth is painted to them for their whole life.
Right. And what
Hmm.
stands out for me is still we need to check how far along you are. Because
Right,
a woman
exactly.
can be 4 centimeters and then dilate really quick and give birth. A woman can be at
Be
nine
at
centimeters for
nine.
a long time, and
A woman
that's
can be at
not
10 centimeters for a long
exactly,
time.
and that's not going to necessarily determine when baby is coming.
Right,
It can give
right.
information. I'm not discounting that it gives information. It absolutely does. But
Yes, of
what
course it
information
does.
is it giving? And is it giving the same information all the time? Which
Right,
I would
Hmm.
lean towards it doesn't give the same information for every woman because it can't. But
right.
um,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
but continue.
Good questions. Beautiful. Thank you so much for being
Yeah,
open to us,
well,
like pondering and
now you're
unpacking and yeah, putting you in a
totally.
process like, she
What
walks
is
in.
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
I'm
Sorry.
starting to think this is not the best hospital in Canada
But it still might be like,
anymore.
yeah.
Oh,
But that would be so
yeah.
beautiful if we come to that, right? Like, and that's why I just want to express in this moment, like, so
Hmm.
much gratitude for you, and you're willing to step in, share your story, and be in a back and forth dynamic conversation of contemplation and curiosity, and just, it's not to determine yes or no or to prove a point. It's like, let's sit down, three women together, and be curious about these different like layers of your story specifically, and then being curious around the birthing environment for all women, because I really feel like it is the unification of women and us coming together to unpack these stories and to sit with these stories to determine what we want collectively, right? What most women
Hmm.
across the board want, and how we can shift the overall birthing spaces across the board to orient in these directions. So thank you.
And I just want to add as well, if we do come to the end of this conversation and we are like, let's say, agreeing, like, wow, this could be the best hospital for birthing in Canada, and yet we're still seeing these subtleties of like coercion and pressure and intervention and all these pieces, then it's like, okay, let's come together and continue to do this work and
Right.
continue, as you said,
Hmm.
like to create safer spaces for women to and babies to birth with like sovereignly, but still with support, whatever that support might look like. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, now it's like I'm about to say the second, like the last part, right? And it's like, and I'm like, okay, well, actually, like, I obviously, so my water broke and I was transitioning again. And I don't, like right before the pushing phase. And it was the nurse, the nurse that like asked my doula like that we kind of had to like now move to the more of the private room. And that in itself, like that obviously that wouldn't happen in a home birth. You would have, if whether it's like in a tub, like in a big tub or whatever, it's like so I think the reason for that is because the space that I was in was very small. Like that tub was like not enough to like if someone needed to like help like catch the baby or whatever it is. Like it's like that in itself is almost a little bit. I think like a bit of a um, like that wouldn't happen in a home setting, in a home maybe in a home birth. So anyway, so I moved to the private room and then I continue the process there. And I go into like the pushing phase. The doctor walks in because at this point the doctor has not shown up the entire time. Good. I'm like that's good. And then so she comes in and then she asks to do a cervical check. And this time I had told my doula specifically that no, I do not feel like before the whole process that no, I do not want one. And at that point, I was not in a place to advocate for myself. I was kind of like really like in the zone and I'm almost at the pushing phase. And so she said no to the doctor for me. And the doctor said, okay, like she doesn't look like it didn't really I was kind of I guess like on the outside, people assumed I was handling it pretty well. Like I was doing like the deep voice, like the deep sounds, and I was like like steady and everything like that. Obviously, on the inside, I'm like, you know, going through a whole process. And so, um, but the doctors thought I still had a long way to go. And so she left. And as soon as she left, I think baby came out in like, a few minutes after that. Um, so and the nurse caught her. So
How did you
and I
feel when the doctor came out in? Like, what was that experience for you? Like, specifically,
there was
like, it
I
stands out for me that you met the doctor for the first time, like, right as you're
mhm,
about to start pushing. Like,
mhm.
how did that feel?
Yeah, there was definitely like a pause for me, like in that process. Like there was a pause because I was being asked a question and a question that I felt uncomfortable saying yes to. And so I'm glad that like my team stepped in, at that moment. But yeah, that's how I would explain it, is that there was a pause. I was and luckily not a very long one because, question answered, left the room, and then I continued and yeah. So
Right. And so I am curious, Sam, so we have this doctor come in and request, hey, can I check your cervix again? And then you said it was your doula or the nurse that advocated for you?
The doula
No,
advocated.
it was my
It was the
doula, and I
doula.
think yeah, and I think my doula actually asked, like, I'm just like it's kind of hazy that moment, but I think she asked me first before answering for me. She asked me first, and I was like, no,
Uh-huh.
like no, and then she already knew my answer, but she just double checked, like she just wanted to check again with me, and then she answered for me to
Right.
the doctor.
And so then my question would be, like, the doctor seemed to say, like, as you said, like, oh, she's going to be a bit longer, it's fine, so leaves. What is the purpose? Because we did talk a little bit about cervical checks already in this conversation, and I'm curious to know from your perspective, what would be the purpose of a cervical check? Because no matter what information they would have or would have not received from Alessandra, your cervix in that moment, baby came, like you said, a few pushes like after that, like really, really quick after that. So, what would be the purpose of checking a cervix if baby's going to come when baby's going to come? If I'm phrasing that.
They are looking for more clarity on a timeline 100% of the time, for sure. And so in that late stage of checking, like you'd be checking for sure the how dilated she is, but also if she's close to full dilation, full effacement, there could be little things physiological that are happening that doctors will sometimes orient towards helping or supporting with. Some things like a cervical lip, which can be just a piece of tissue that's over one corner of the baby's head that's just preventing the baby from dropping fully into the birth canal in order to be birthed. And, in from the physiological perspective, the body will take care of that. It's just can we allow for, a couple more contractions to be the thing that adjusts that, or does it need to happen manually? And so, with the fact that the baby came, like you said, within minutes after, like there's a few things that I hear when you share that, like I really hear this doctor is a female, was it? This
Yeah,
female
yeah.
doctor coming in, I feel this moment as quite a significant disturbance, just in the fact that, you said I met the doctor for the first time, like right before the pushing stage. So like at that point, you're so deep into the active labor process and your consciousness is in your limbic brain. You're in that primal state. You're not in the prefrontal thinking and processing. So the fact that that doctor came in and asked you any question took you out of your process. The moment a question was asked to you, you had to come to your prefrontal cortex to be able to think. Even if it was enough to just muster the no, you know, that when you describe it like that to me, it shows me how deep you were in your process and in your state, right? And actually how disturbing it was to be asked a question that you had to muster it like that. It's like that is you were not in a stage of your process with which a question should be asked in my opinion, right? Like that's my opinion, and there's going to be practitioners across the spectrum that would, I'm sure, believe differently. I would not disturb you in that moment. um,
Hmm.
and then like you're describing it, it led to a pause in the process is what you're saying, right? And so like just that, like you're basically saying this was a moment of disturbance. And then when I hear you describe, as soon as she left, the baby came. What that
Hmm.
tells me is your system returned to a space of safety when that doctor left that room. And
Mm.
that final opening was able to happen. That disturbance was gone from the field. And I feel curious around whether, because that whether that was conscious, even up to this conversation, maybe not conscious, but like your body, I feel very curious of whether it was more of like an urgent thing because she comes in this very delicate state where your whole consciousness is here to protect you, like, like wanting to be in a bubble and in a safe space. This thing, this being, this energy, this entity, this whatever comes in and is taking you out of the process. Now they leave. I feel curious if you're like, okay, I got to birth before she gets back, and not even in a conscious state, but in,
Yeah.
the subconscious, more just, you know, primitive part of yourself. That's like just the way that you're telling the story. I'm like, oh, I'm very curious around what was happening on the very subtle layers of your being there.
My timeline is a little fuzzy, but it's interesting that you bring up that question because I'm not sure if I think it was after she left. I think it was soon because yes, it was after she left because then I got into the pushing phase. And at the beginning, my, you know how you're supposed to like have like an O shape and kind of like deep, kind of like voices, like sounds, like you're like moo or O when you're pushing. And I kind of went a little bit high pitched in that moment. And I, c- I did try to like so here's the thing. There was a part where I was like, at that point, I was, I didn't want to be in my body anymore. I was like, it was painful at at that moment. And so I think that was, it could have also been with the presence of the doctor, but I pushed a little too hard to like try and like kind of, and I screamed in a tight, I don't know how to explain it, but like in a kind of like tightening voice where I tore a little bit because it was like I was just trying to like get her out. And that's when my doula was like, like take a deep breath and kind of uh, and and then I kind of like paused at that moment, took a deep breath, and the baby actually went in a little bit. Like it's almost like that little process restart. Like it was like a bit of a reset. Like she went back in. I kind of like timed it with the next contraction, and then this time slower and deeper, and kind of like recalibrated again, and then that she came out like that. But at that moment, like in those few seconds or I don't know, minutes, whatever, first part of the pushing phase, that's when I tore. And it's interesting. I never correlated it that maybe at that moment it was like a disturbance. It kind of maybe I felt a little bit unsafe,
Right. Right.
threw me
Right.
off. And
Right.
then once I felt safety in my body and supported, that maybe,
Became.
yeah, she came.
Right.
Did you
And just
feel,
to, go ahead.
oh, sorry, just did
Sorry.
you feel when you tore, or were you informed of that?
No, I felt
You
it.
felt it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I felt it.
And that was
Yeah, like
your perineum that tore?
it was actually further up.
Further up.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it was a very minor tear, but still, it was like a kind of like a burning sensation. I've, if I like it was kind of all at once, right? Like you're pushing and she's coming out, and then all of a sudden you feel the tear, and I'm like, and then you kind of like retract it also at the same time, and so that was, so I think, yeah, it's funny. I never made that correlation, and I think that that's part of it, and that's an interesting conversation too.
Right. And I'd also just like to add a name, like uh, the disturbance of simply leaving your home. And I really commend your doula in terms of some of the steps that she was taking to really keep you protected in that process. Things like, putting the blanket over you as you entered the hospital to, protect against the fluorescent lights, because inevitably the fluorescent lights are going to have a physiological thing going with the eyes, right? So like beautiful steps, and I really commend all of those things. And I think that in and of itself is such a beautiful conversation of like, okay, what are steps that we can take to protect that process as much as possible when a transfer is or needs to happen, right? Because that's going to be a part of lived reality in some birth stories. And so how can we, in the wake of that, be doing everything that we can to, provide a sense of safety? However, the moment of leaving the nest, regardless, there is going to be a physiological nervous system response to that, because it is the safest place that the woman knows. It's the safest place our consciousness and our psyche knows is our home, our bed, our safe space,
Well,
right?
and
And so,
I think beyond just that being a safe space, that's the space that you were in. And then if you're
right.
leaving that, then all of a sudden you're introducing new stimuli, you're introducing just a new landscape, a new, yeah, space that you're in.
Exactly. And so likely that process is also, taking you out of that limbic process, that very primitive, inward, deeply intuitive bubble, right? That is created when we're in that laboring process in space. And so, it does sound to me like there was kind of a process, because I feel really curious about just ways that certain things you're describing, right? You're saying the doula was labeling like at the house, we're approaching transition. I think now we need to move, right? And so oftentimes like there seems to have been a lot of steps that then happen between her labeling, I think we're at transition in the home, and now we're to the point of pushing in the hospital setting, right? And so like I feel curious around what was happening for you maybe even on subtle like layers that you haven't, considered, as well as some of these things are bringing up that, like, those points of, oh, I didn't
Hmm.
think about that in that way, or these things. I think it's very curious to just explore the subtleties, right? Because birth is so sensitive. It is the most sensitive space. And so it is these very, very, very subtle things that can impact, and that's where my consideration and curiosity is always going. Like, for me, it's like, how am I walking even in a person's home is in my consciousness, right? Like, am I like duk, 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 duk through the house, or am I like, trying to walk and being conscious of like the way I'm breathing? Like for me, in the orientation towards how can I not disturb this birth space, it's that subtle for me.
Hmm.
What is the sound of my breath? What is the sound of my footsteps? How am I moving around the space? Like, just to the deepest degree is where I'm, always contemplating. And so just these things of moving and having a doctor come in and being asked questions, and the blood draw, the cervical check, like I have been making like a little list of notes of like what I would actually consider disturbance, as you've been sharing
Hmm.
and highlighting
Hmm.
them along the way. But like, yeah, the room change at transition, just these things, right? That's a big thing, to just change room. Like, again, you said that probably wouldn't happen in a home setting, and
Hmm.
it might. But if it did happen in an undisturbed home setting, it would happen because the mother was initiating it and she felt the need to move. I did that in the midst of transition in my first birth. Moved, I got panicky. The water's too hot. The fire's too hot. Get me out of here. I'm like crawling out of the room basically because I felt the need to move, right?
Right.
Hmm.
So,
And so, okay, in this moment, I would like to define, I not me define, I would like actually Sam to do this for us, to define what an undisturbed birth is, because undisturbed birth, and we talked about this before we got on the call, is not necessarily birthing alone. It's not necessarily birthing without support. And I remember reading your birth story, and you even asked for assistance from your sister to check you.
yep,
And
exactly. I
that
did.
that feels, yeah, if you could speak into that a little bit, Sam, just to get some clarity on what an undisturbed birth actually is, knowing that it's not just one thing, and it doesn't have to mean that you are not perceived at all, that you are not completely on your own in the middle of a forest with no help to be found.
Right. Well, in full transparency, I feel like it's something I'm in constant contemplation around. And I think that it's a very nuanced thing to put a definitive definition on, because the reality is quantum physics tells us that the process of being observed in and of itself does change the particle's expression. And so have being observed, period, is and can be seen as a layer of disturbance. And for some women who are sensitive, who are in a space where they feel ready to just fully activate that free birth, and they want just them and their partner there, that observation in and of itself, even if it were to be a wise woman sitting in the corner knitting, not saying a word, could be a disturbance for some women, right? And so I think that it's actually a really, really difficult thing to define, and I think that that's why just like curious conversation is the only place to be in, and also just like meeting each woman, right? Like, it's like I'm listing these things as I'm feeling curious around, were they disturbances? That doesn't mean I'm trying to tell you that your birth was disturbed, right? I'm like, oh, let's, oh, but did you think of this, or how did you feel in that moment? Because I would feel curious in my experience. I know that for some women these things would be very disturbing, and for others they would be the very things that would elicit a sense of safety, right? And so we have to understand these nuances of some people, some women would literally are waiting. I know a woman recently that I was unpacking her birth story with in integration session post birth, and she was waiting for her midwife to come and check her cervix and give her an idea of where she was at. And it ended up being something that did still cause harm, but she wanted it and was asking for it, right? And so like there's so much nuance, and like it's not about placing judgment, because we have to honor the reality that women are different and they want different things. And, in the contemplation of what is a disturbed birth, I think the mature thing is to not be labeling that as any black or white thing, right? Which is like where I think that there's harm being caused by organizations such as the Free Birth Society when they say this is 100% of the time disturbing, and they put that out as a black and white statement for women, and then they have these women who have experienced it and say, but I didn't feel disturbed.
So
And
is it
why are you telling me my birth was disturbed? That feels traumatizing. You telling me that my birth was disturbed, you know? And so like I really don't want to define that, and I don't want to be the one to tell women how they should be integrating their birth stories. I for women that are willing to come into a space of conversation and curious exploration, I'll be in that, you know, and be curious and explore and ask questions. But, you know, in no way is my prayer for Alessandra to walk away today and be like, oh, it was disturbed, you know? and if that and if that is what happens in certain parts of it, and like you feel open and willing to receive that and integrate that, then I really trust in the medicine of conversation and women coming together in circle to explore, you know?
right?
So I guess I'll leave it at that as a
So
response.
so would
I
it
didn't really answer the
would it
question, sorry.
no, you did. But so what I'm summarizing or hearing from that is like, would you say, I guess, that a disturbed or undisturbed birth is not one whole thing? It's more dependent on a woman's true, uh, I guess, somatic and emotional experience. And what could
Yes.
disturb one individual would actually feel very undisturbing and supportive to someone else.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yes, I would claim that. And then I would also like be curious around as a woman, you know, grows in her years after her birthing moment, and let's say, you know, is studying birth or, you know, having different teachings come into her field, she could also, you know, come to perceive her birth in different ways, you know, as time goes on and as new information, new experiences shape her and mold her in new ways. And so, yeah, I do. Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting conversation. It's you know, you were talking about how, you know, of course every woman's different and everyone's experience of, you know, like I'm just trying to think of, you know, because I spent about like a year preparing myself for having an unmedicated and physiological birth. However, I think I wasn't really considering, I think I was more afraid of like I don't even want to say like big interventions, but it's like the interventions that I think I knew, like I understood by reading a book. But with having this conversation, now I'm seeing, okay, there are other forms of disturbance, you know, and I think going into my first pregnancy, I wasn't fully aware of like, oh, I guess, you know, I knew that like the bright lights could disturb me, can get me out of my zone, but I think I didn't take it as like it can, like the doctor walking in or even the doctor's presence like that. You know, I assumed that the doctor was going to at one point come and check on me, you know, like it was like alright, like I know that's going to happen. It's like, you know what I mean? And it's like I didn't ever consider that being a disturbance, but it was a disturbance in my pregnancy. And so i I think
In your
it's like what
pregnancy or
are,
birth?
sorry, birth, sorry.
Yeah. No, no, that's
Yeah,
okay. I
yes,
just wanted to
yeah,
clarify.
yeah, yeah, sorry, and my birth. And so Um, I think going into birth, my why, like my big why, and like what, you know, kept me with like wanting that, you know, with wanting a physiological unmedicated birth was my why was because I know that like no one can escape pain. And you can't, you know, you can't numb yourself. Everyone goes through pain. And I felt that there was a very important lesson, like there was something that I absolutely needed to go through, and I needed to go through this pain. And I needed to know um, that that you just can't, you can't bypass that, you know. And so that was my why, and that kept me like on course, you know, and every single time I thought of, and so I think it's very different for every single person, and that's why I think the disturbance of the doctor was not even on my radar because I was thinking more of like the medication I
Right.
was thinking more about like the
The
epidural and the
Pitocin,
Pitocin
yeah,
and all this
exactly.
stuff. Those for me were the disturbances,
Right.
because that affected my why. And so I think that that's an interesting question to like for like you were mentioning like the other like the birth story. Yeah, I don't know. It was just something that came up.
Absolutely.
Well,
I,
thank you so much for sharing that,
mhm,
honestly. And like, I think, yeah, I feel really grateful for you to just really vulnerably, like, I just want to, acknowledge
Hmm.
that it's like, this is what I was aware of, and this is what I was labeling as disturbance, and I didn't think
Hmm.
about these other things. And as we, we're in the conversation and in the dialogue, you're like, oh, but wait, that was actually disturbing.
Hmm.
And, there's something really profound in that for me. And it's not about like, oh yay, now she sees it as disturbing. It's about understanding that, like, when we're given new information and we're given kind of a permission to consider the subtleties as women,
Hmm.
that then it's like, oh, I do actually have a preference there, right?
Hmm.
That maybe we just weren't even considering or contemplating at all because of whatever, levels of layers of nuance in the field are preventing us from going to contemplating these things. But it's just such a beautiful activation, for women everywhere to give unwavering permission to contemplate every detail when it comes to preparing for your birth, right? And to really, be encouraging women as workers to go into, as sisters, to women, to go into contemplating the subtleties and, really orchestrating what we want, right? And
Hmm.
so, yeah, just thank you for that.
yeah.
Yeah. And I also wanted to, there was one point where you mentioned, like I was birthing at home and how that translated like in the hospital. I think there are two things I think that like that was consistent throughout. And that was like the three people, my partner, my doula Jen, and my friend Anna. And they were, supporting me in the sense they were like hitting my, like they were touching like my, is it the acupoints, the points, um, throughout the whole process, even when we arrived to the hospital and while I was in the tub, um, and I was being supported there. So I feel like that setting didn't change. It's almost like, when people say like
Right,
home is where the heart is. It's like I felt like I was able to like I this whole group like we kind of just
right,
that scene kind of just moved into a different location. And although I understand like the switching of locations that can pull people out, it's like I also had the music going nonstop like
right,
throughout the entire
beautiful.
thing.
Yeah.
So that kind of also kept me and like more like my ancestral roots. So it also kept me like really in the zone in that sense.
Yeah. That's
Really
beautiful. And
like.
even just the touch specifically, right? Like to have somebody have
Mhm.
your hands on you as you're going, I can really see that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I think it that whole I think that was what I was trying to say is like that was the consistency throughout
Mhm.
the different changes of rooms, lights. And also I do want to add is that when I was in the tub, like in that area, like this big bathroom, and also moving into like the private room, the lights were dim. Like they didn't have like the fluorescent lights in there. But I'm sure that maybe hospitals have changed that. I'm not sure if birthing hospitals have changed that, but this one did. This one had that. Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah,
Hmm.
and I think that that's really beneficial for listeners and for every woman who is preparing for a birth, whether their intention is to go to a hospital or not, to just be aware of subtle things that can be done if and when a transfer is being activated, right? Like,
Hmm.
so how can we protect against fluorescent lights, maintaining touch, having something like music in the field to provide a constant in that shift and to keep the mind kind of anchored in kind of the birth portal versus the sounds of the cars as you're traveling and all this other things that can really pull you external. I love that, so thank you for sharing.
Well, even that bubble that you were describing with like you and the three other people. So no matter if the nurses shifted or the doctor shifted, because we were talking about that as well earlier in this conversation, that sometimes there's just shift changes in hospitals and all of those things, but you had your core consistent group there, which just,
Hmm.
I'm for me as you were talking about that, I was like, oh, you had a bubble. Like I just kept seeing this like bubble that was surrounding you, like this protective force field almost, where like you were
Yeah.
just held and your baby got to be born within that like birth bubble
Bubble.
that you created,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
yeah, and I want to add that the nurse was is also part of that birth
Okay,
bubble
great.
because she was also the one, like just the only one that was designated like to me, and so she was there throughout the whole process as
Mhm.
well.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And
Okay, so what happens after? Oh, sorry. Do
no,
you have
no,
another
go,
question?
you go, you go. I'll
I
drink my
was
coffee.
gonna say, so what happens next? Enjoy your coffee. So what happens as you transition into the birthing room? I would love to hear the end of the story.
Yeah. Well, so I entered the doctor came in, then I entered the pushing phase, and then well, I don't know. I think I mentioned yeah. So around the end, so like the nurse catches the baby, and then the doctor comes in at that point when the baby's already born. Um, and at that point, it's really just to like, okay, let's check and see if you like for tear. At that point, they also ask you
Hmm.
whether you want Pitocin or oh yeah, this one actually really did bug me now that because they ask you like for the
Injection
clamping
of
the clamping of the cord and also the placenta. I at the time I was like still like completely out of it, but the one thing I just really didn't want them to do was like tug my placenta out of there. Like, hello, like as I want that as natural as like I want my placenta to come out, but as natural as possible. Unfortunately, I don't think that happened. Because I asked my doula at the end, did they like tug? And she was like, yeah, they kind of did. It was I think I prolonged it, like we prolonged it as long as possible. Like the clamping, I asked them to like wait until like the umbilical cord is like completely white. Which they did. Like, but you know, like as soon as it was like white, they're like, okay, done. It's like the next and then I think the whole process of like I felt like it was rushed, is what I'm trying to say. I felt that process was rushed. Um, it may again like I'm really hazy in this situation like in this moment, so I think I could be perceiving it wrong, but it just in my like how I felt that it was rushed, and I don't think that that would have been in that wouldn't have been in a different like if it was not a hospital setting I think that that would have been respected.
Do you remember debriefing with your doulas after the birth
Hmm.
about,
Hmm.
their experience of potentially advocating for not tugging on the placenta? Because a doula's job isn't done when the
Yeah,
baby's born. Like there's, the
yeah.
time afterwards as well that is, you know, I would say a massive part of the birth and having an undisturbed birth
Hmm.
as you're already describing. And so I'm wondering if they did advocate or if they felt that they couldn't, or if you had any integrating conversations with both of them, your friend and the other doula afterwards.
Yeah, we did have a integrating conversation after. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really remember that situation. I feel like I don't know. I feel like maybe it was they tried to push it as long as possible, I think is what happened.
Mhm.
Because I believe that I did like not I wanted it to be as like natural as possible, but I feel like yeah.
Hospitals have
Um
timelines.
yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. And it was so funny because even for the like the stitching, like to add to for the stitches for the small tear that I had, I was like, no, I don't want that. I don't want this. I don't want the stitches. But in the end, it was like so silly because I just gave birth. I literally just did like the hardest thing ever, and I was like afraid of getting like a needle, like stitching. It was ridiculous. But anyways,
No, it
but
wasn't ridiculous. I think that that's totally fair.
And you
And,
had,
like I would actually just speak into like how deeply sensitive you are in that state. And it's actually
Mhm.
something that I always speak into in preparation work with the families that I walk with, and specifically, orienting towards sharing with the mother of like, the moments after emergence are so precious and so delicate and so sensitive. And so really, sitting down with mothers and families to have a plan around holding that that moment, because what I found within myself and my own experiences, and then what I see in mothers that I support, is almost as though it's like, okay, you just accomplished the mission that you've prepared, you know, 9+ months if there was a conscious conception journey, right? Like four, and like you've prepared for that moment of birth, right? And the baby comes out, and then it's like, oh my God, I'm not done, right? Then the uterus continues to contract. And it's like, oh my God, what? And it's like, okay, then that marathon of birthing the placenta when you just want to be done, right? And then the placenta comes out, and still like everything in your physiology and in your consciousness is like, I just need to be here with my baby. Don't touch me. I just need to rest. I just need to land. Like there's this actual landing period and process. And, so to really actually just honor the reality of what was happening there. Like I really just, don't see yourself as being ridiculous, please, because it's really
Mhm.
valid that you didn't want to be stitched. Like, and, because you are so delicate, you are so sensitive, your energy is so open. You're in this golden hour period where everything in your biology is oriented towards something other than having someone's hands inside your vulva and, stitching you. And so, like, I really honor that response for you, and really encourage you to also, honor that as like, no, it really makes sense that that felt overwhelming. And, and there, then we can talk about the nuances of like, okay, and it got stitched up and then it healed quicker, you could have done sovereign healing, but there's, it's like, but just to honor that moment of like, that was not what your body or mind felt that you wanted in that moment. And that really makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It's not silly.
Hmm.
Can I ask if you were given the choice of receiving stitches or
Yes.
not?
Yep.
Okay.
I was asked.
Okay. And so because the tear was, you said quite small, that
It was, yeah, it was not
like a
even a one
micro.
degree. It was like, it was,
Yeah.
it was micro. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so then you said yes. Can I ask, you had this like somatic response of like, oh my God, no, but then you said yes. Can I ask what happened in that decision-making process in that space of time?
Yeah. Uh, so I was like, so I said no, like because I was just like, no, I don't want. And it was really them saying like, it's so, you're not even gonna feel it. It's so tiny. Like it's just like it's. I feel like if uh again hazy. I can't tell you the exact words that were being used, but it was kind of like just saying that it's such a small like procedure or like that you're not even going to realize it. And in a sense it was literally seconds. Like finally I said okay, like after hearing that it's going to be like a minimal amount, and it was like, and it was, and it was not bad at all, but it was just like in that moment I was like, no, 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 I
The
don't
thought of
want
it
that.
was overwhelming.
Right.
Yeah.
Which then
Yeah.
to me, I'm wondering if there was an actual choice. Because what I'm hearing is that you said no, and then they said, oh, well, you're not even going to feel it. And to me, in my experiences and what's informed this feeling has been like when somebody's coercing me or manipulating me into making a
Hmm.
decision, maybe it's presented as a choice, but then there might also be a little bit of pressure. And is it pressure? Is it informing? I can't make that call for you and how that felt. I'm just wondering
Yeah.
what that
I
journey
probably
what was like for you.
I probably could have. I mean, I said no, but I probably could have just, they would have been like fine, like no problem. But it, I think, I think it was due to like, anyways, I feel like I also didn't have that much information because obviously I can't see like what's going
Right,
on.
of
So
course.
it's like I don't have the full picture of exactly like what do you mean that, like what kind of tear, a micro tear, like what is a tear even? What do you mean? Like I've never even seen a tear on like this is my first pregnancy. It's like those things too. And so I think I placed my trust in that moment in the doctor, uh, that for them to say like, okay, well, again, they asked, and I feel like I probably could have just said no, but in that time, I felt like the pressure of them saying like, oh, it's small, it's going to take 2 seconds. I was like, okay, just do it. Um, yeah. So, conclusion, are we, is it the best hospital in Canada? I don't know. I mean, after all this, man, we've just unpacked so much, and I feel like I'm just not sure.
Well, and
I mean, what I
Um,
would say is it's still a hospital, right?
mhm,
And like it's a hospital in Canada, and like Canada for sure is not the most progressive in terms of its standards, but I will say like we're moving in a good direction, right? And there are certain things that did happen in your birth story that I would really celebrate in terms of, moving in that direction of um yeah, being less disturbing in birth. And
mhm,
like I feel deeply curious, like even just like the whole like statement, right, of like a physiological non-disturbing disturbed birth in a hospital. Like when I have that
mhm,
written down in my day planner for today's call, and like me and everything that I've learned, I'm like, okay, let's see. Like
how is that possible?
mhm,
how is it possible,
mhm,
right? Because like for me, it's like there are so many layers of disturbance that are
mhm,
typical that I see in the hospital. And again, then we have the doors of perception and like what is innately a disturbance, what isn't, what only is seen as a disturbance as a woman, continues to learn and grow, because that's another nuance of like, even we just watched it happen in real time in this conversation of you coming on and saying like, I had an undisturbed physiological birth in a hospital. And like throughout the conversation, you've been like, oh, wait, maybe that was a disturbance. Oh, maybe that was a disturbance. Oh, and so like,
mhm,
and that can also unfold in that way. And so it's just, I don't know, the nuances and complexities of this human experience are always, yeah, just so nuanced and complex.
Yeah. And I think that's such a big piece there is like we're not I don't know, it's I don't even know what I'm saying. Just one woman's experience is her experience. And you can have really beautiful experiences in hospitals and at home and free birth and throughout all these different things. And it's not a wholly one or the other thing. It's not to say that your birth was perfect, because what is perfect? Or your birth was completely flawed and you have to view it as being traumatic or disturbed or whatever it might be. It's just exploring again these nuances and
mhm,
seeing the beauty that hospitals bring and seeing that there are some fundamental, I think, issues within hospitals. And I mean, they do save lives. They do really incredible, beautiful, wonderful things. And so yeah, I mean, it's just so nuanced, it's so subtle, it's so layered, right? And I
mhm,
really hope that you don't walk away from this conversation being like, oh no, my birth was insert descriptive word and just, painting it one color. I hope that you walk away
mhm,
and you're like, wow, look at all of these other layers that I can continue, looking at and exploring and just discovering. Because I think that's such a big piece. And even there were some moments as we were discussing, I was reflecting on like, wow, like a woman's consciousness birth, reflects her birth or whatever, that this statement that we've unpacked in the past. And as I landed hearing all of us reflecting on your story and all of these layers, I was like, wow, it's not just a woman's birth reflects her consciousness. It's the way that we perceive birth reflects our consciousness. And the way that you planned your birth and the pieces that you brought in, the way that you chose to have your care team present, the books that you read, the ways that you were just exploring like your relationship to pain and all of those pieces. And even now, your willingness to show up to this conversation and see those deeper layers. I see that in the way that you prepared for your birth as well. And that is such a massive thread of how can we continue to deepen our relationship to ourselves, to our birth, and to our birth story, not to tell it once or integrate it once and then be done, but continue to integrate it and integrate our understandings
Exactly.
around what birth could be. Because, in a previous episode, we were discussing like this idea of in a utopian society having birth workers all have experiences, like as a baseline, all have experienced physiological birth. And that is it's a utopian ideal, but we don't know what that world could even look like because we come from this space of having hospitals and birth trauma and our sisters and mothers and aunties stories informing our decision making, informing our perspectives as a whole. And
Right.
yeah, I just all that to say, roundabout way of saying thank you for being here and
Right.
willing to share your story and willing to discuss the various layers that we observed and that were present.
Hmm. I do want to add is that like I think going in, the reason why I ended up choosing the hospital birth is because I had that scary, life death
Miscarriage experience.
situation.
Right.
Yeah. And I was I was getting prepared for like a blood transfusion because it was really scary. And so I wanted to, I don't know, I guess in that moment I felt that hospital was a safe place like
Right.
for me, but and so that's why and then I did everything in my power like to set up a team that would create that, that I would, because I still went in feeling like I said, like I was preparing for war because there are things that are gonna, like there are doctors that are gonna, still push things and here
Right.
and there, but ideally less, you know, hopefully less at this hospital than other hospitals, but um, that's what I was expecting. But yeah, and I would say for my second birth, I'm not considering a hospital again. It's like I actually would like to go more down the. I don't know if I'm going. I would like to have a home birth. Like I'd like to go down that route. And part of that experience of my first birth, I know I can do it, and so yeah, it's just also like an interesting take. Like now it's not that I'm gonna go back to a hospital. It's like I had a really good experience. Like for me, it was a positive unmedicated birth, not undisturbed, but unmedicated.
Working with a reframe.
Yeah, let's reframe that. Yeah, no, it's so yeah, I don't know. We'll see what's in store,
Mhm.
Yeah,
but
you
I'm
know,
glad.
that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. I do want to echo the that statement. I still went into it feeling like I was preparing for
I
war.
know, I was gonna
Like
reflect that
that
too.
was just like, whoo,
Yeah.
okay. So like even in like the that perception of like, okay, you're a woman who went into this hospital setting. You had an experience that actually elicited safety and trust in you due to the medical staff and the care that you received in that miscarrying experience, and that's what led you to orient towards it. And even in spite of that, you still felt like you were preparing for war, right? And so how can we like how can that be baseline of what we're trying to orient towards shifting in the hospital experience, right? For a woman to feel as though she has her sovereignty intact when she steps into a systematic environment, a medical industrialized environment to give birth, because sovereignty should be baseline, it should be non-negotiable,
Hmm.
right? And so that's just, yeah, that's a very like profound statement. And then the last thing I just wanted to echo was just bringing it back again, recircling to this transition that you've gone through, even going from undisturbed to unmedicalized birth and your willingness to go there. And it really makes me think of the work that I do in integration with birth, and this dance of like, okay, it's not that we ever want to be shifting a woman's perception of her birth for it in a more like traumatic or less desirable way, right? But the nuance there is that we also don't want to avoid doing that. And so it is such a delicate dance in terms of how we are interacting with these stories and meeting women because avoidance and just blankly being in like, no, but like it was a good birth and I'm believing that. I don't necessarily think that lands somatically. And so if the body or if these more subtle layers of our of our mind, of our body are holding certain experiences as though they weren't the highest alignment, but the woman is attached in the conscious mind of like, but it was a good birth, like I liked it and I felt undisturbed. It's like, okay, so like how can we come into these conversations and into these integration processes holding that prayer of like, let's not be avoidant, nor like try to orient towards wronging anyone or anything in the story and in the space, you know? And yeah, it's just, I mean,
Well, and
such a delicate thing.
the opposite is
Right.
also true, right? I think there's that flexibility, that willingness to be dynamic, right? Because you
Hmm.
can walk away. I could have easily walked away and been like, whoa, my birth was only traumatic. And it was absolutely like very traumatic, but there was beautiful pieces in it. There was in like deeply reverent, sacred, beautiful pieces as well. And I'm working on a post for Birth the Middle Way that I just was reminded of today. And I'm creating a list of questions to ask your care team as you're building your care team. And so, Alessandra, if you have any to include in that, I would love to receive them because this is such a big piece um, of building relationship with doctors, hospitals, nurses, doulas, midwives, your partner, all of these pieces, and writing these questions that are more conversation like icebreakers almost, because we can ask questions to our doctors. We can question their authority. We can question what they think they know. We absolutely are allowed
Their
to do that.
beliefs,
We're
right?
allowed to question their beliefs. We're allowed to question, hey, how did you get to this conclusion? Right? This is our baby's life. This is our baby's body. This is our body. We are allowed to be curious and to ask these questions. That doesn't mean we're undermining anyone's intelligence or wisdom or journey through their educational path, but we're allowed to ask questions and we're allowed to ask questions. And I think that's a piece that so many women don't, I guess, realize that they can do. And from what I gather, you had several meetings with your doctors and your care team. And the way that you described it, you built your birth team very intentionally. And you had a lot of these conversations of what you wanted and what you were wanting to not have, which was the, epidural, Pitocin, the bright lights. Like you listed a few of those pieces. Um, and so I just wanted to mention that as well because you're allowed to ask questions.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Are there any
Do you have
final,
any? Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Do you have any
any
final
final
closing
pieces?
thoughts?
Any final thoughts?
I feel like I contradicted myself. Like it was um with the
I feel like what you did was so valuable, my love. I
Mm.
really, really feel like this conversation was incredible, and I feel a lot of gratitude for you, and I feel like, yeah, what you were very vulnerable and um, really dynamic and really willing to shift some perspectives. And I just really pray that you walk out of this conversation with a lot of compassion for yourself and more so celebration around new perspective and information that entered your field that you maybe didn't have before this conversation, and the perfection around
yeah.
that and the path of growth that is always happening, right? And we can't expect ourselves to be at any point before we're there, right? And
Hmm.
that's the beauty in this interpersonal dynamic path that all of us are walking. And as we bump up with each other and exchange, literally exchange concepts, experiences, stories, ideas, right? That's the medicine of our humanness. And so I think that your contradiction was perfect. I think that you came in with the perfect perception, and I found you very willing to engage with it all. And I feel really, really grateful. And I think that this conversation and your story is going to be valuable for a lot of women.
I was just going to say, I
Thank you
feel
so
like,
much.
yeah, so many women are going to see themselves in you and in your story.
Mm.
And yeah, walk away feeling seen.
I do, Alessandra. Like, I've been studying birth for over 10 years, and I still, like, I'm sitting here with a book next to me that, like, I'm starting to read and, like, oh my God, like, oh, we are always growing, we're always learning, and we cannot feel shame around what we didn't know the day before we knew something new, Like,
Hmm.
it's beautiful, it's perfect. And, like, I know for a fact that 30 years from now, I'm going to turn around and look at myself recording this podcast being like, what did I think I know? Like, what authority did I think I had to even be starting a podcast? Because I pray that I have learned so much in 30 years from now that, like, I look back at this version of myself and think that I really didn't know anything, because that's how much there is to learn.
Yeah.
And that excites me,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
And I pray that it excites us all, and
Mm.
excites all the listeners. Like, it, we don't know what we don't know, and that is perfect. And we will know what we will know eventually, and we won't know what we're not meant to know. And that we're gonna die not knowing a lot of things about this crazy human experience that we're all in.
Yeah. And that's the
That's beautiful.
yeah, that's the place, that's the meaning, that's the reason why we're having these conversations though, right? Is to change our minds, to learn
Mhm.
something new, to grow, to evolve. I've been having this fly around this whole only around this
I can't
computer.
see it.
There
I
was
didn't even notice.
there was one point where like it flew over the camera and I'm like, "Oh my God, what is fly medicine? I have no idea what's going on." This hasn't happened before and it's not even on me, it's like on the computer. And so,
And distracting you.
I mean, I guess it could carry some wisdom. But I just yeah, I mean, we're here to grow and learn and change our minds and we're here to look back at our decisions and our lives not with shame or judgment, but with like, wow, look at who I used to be, look at who I was, and look at what I've learned in this time, in a week, in a year, in 30 years, and maybe
Mm.
we'll be sitting around a fire with long gray hair, all of us, and giggling at like, oh my God, do you remember that episode we did? Like,
Right,
what?
totally. Totally.
And just, but
Totally.
seeing ourselves also with love and seeing the women that we used to be with reverence, like with the deepest reverence, you know?
Totally.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just also want to say that like you did speak a little bit into the preparation and for a next birth, and this like for me that is such there's so much in our previous births for preparing for our next birth. Like unpacking and integrating the layers that we didn't know needed to be integrated and going deep into like the nuances of the experience and like what, like coming, 2 years later and being really going back
Mhm.
into the birth story and being like, okay, what was a full yes and what maybe wasn't a full yes that I would want to shift and how because your birth stories are a continuation through you as the woman and the birthing mother, right? And so there's so much medicine in your daughter's birth as prepare to continue birthing future babies, and that's just
Mhm.
such a realm of passion for me is really meeting women in that integration space of like, let's go deeper, let's unpack this birth deeper, let's learn from it more so that you can grow in ways that are preparing you for the next birth, right? And so,
Mhm.
yeah, just keep doing that. And if, I can ever support that in any way, please reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alessandra.